Understanding what happens in each object transaction and in what order is a popular topic in Salesforce certification exams and can often prove critical when troubleshooting issues around recursion, erroneous values, and other problems. And the order of execution is no small topic. At this URL, you can find the order of execution steps from the Salesforce documentation. There are over 20 different steps, some of which can encompass the entirety of the Apex triggers, along with validation rules, workflow rules, flows, duplicate management, and so on. In case the URL on this slide is broken by the time you watch this course, you can find the same page through a search. It looks like this. While I mentioned there being more than 20 steps, and Salesforce very well could be adding even more in the future, we need to not think of that as necessarily a very good thing. The point is not to use all those steps. You'll be better off keeping it simple. The less of these steps you use, the better, because it helps to understand the procedure of an object transaction without having to sift through deep complexity that can be caused by these steps. This somewhat goes back to what I've said earlier in the course about how, if possible, keep the object transaction to only using a single tool. And once you've gone into Apex, it's often best to stay there, unless somehow the transaction could suddenly be greatly simplified to fit entirely in Flow, for example, or something similar. There's a few interesting points to think about when looking at the order of execution document. For one, you'll note that step 2 only occurs in the event that the user is submitting for a record from a standard UI page, such as a page layout. Otherwise, there are certain items that do not occur here if a record is being acted upon by purely system actions. Steps 3 and 4 indicate that the before triggers are running after any flows are executing, which means potentially any actions that might be done by flows could be overwritten by actions coming from the Apex. Look at step 7. The record gets saved to the database but doesn't fully commit yet. In other words, in a record insert, the record might receive a unique ID on the ID field from the database, but because the transaction is not over, the ID doesn't fully exist yet. Or, in an update, fields have received new values coming from earlier in the transaction, but none of those new values are final yet. It isn't until step 21 that data manipulation language, or DML, operations are finally committed to the database. The finalization of changes occurs after lots of other potential steps, including workflows at step 11 and flows at step 14. So with all of this in mind, consider the one tool per object advice. If you only ever have Apex to contend with, many of these steps never need to be considered. Or if you only ever have flow plus validation rules, you're not having to worry about what may have happened in Apex, and so on. Learn to master the content of the object transaction, and keep these steps in the back of your mind as I press on to the hands-on exercises ahead.